Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our panel session where we'll be discussing the topic of what makes Industry 4.0 compelling. My name is Ben Johnson and I'm part of Boston Consulting Group's manufacturing team. And today with me we have a great panel of leading Industry 4.0 experts from both the manufacturing and the technology provider side. So from the manufacturing perspective, we have Kei Hua from REC, who's had a great deal of success implementing and using various Industry 4.0 technologies. And then to offer a differing perspective, we have Saj from Microsoft and Graham from SAP, who'll be shedding some light on how manufacturers have been using various Industry 4.0 solutions to create huge impacts within their organizations. So I guess in the past 5 years, Industry 4.0 has evolved considerably. In 2016, BCG did a study where we asked thousands of manufacturing executives around the world to describe the current state of Industry 4.0. Now, in 2016, only 17% of companies had really had any success with Industry 4.0, and their primary focus was on technology exploration. Now, in 2021, we did a follow-up study, and we found that actually now 84% of companies have had success using Industry 4.0 technologies, and that the primary focus had shifted from technology discovery to value creation, which suggests that in the past 5 years, companies have worked out how to identify the value in Industry 4.0 and how to prioritize it so that it lands on their business agendas. So maybe we start with someone who has really walked the walk. Kei Hua, offering the perspective of a successful adopter. What makes Industry 4.0 compelling to you, and how have you used it to create value within your organization?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kei Hua from REC Solar. So I'm taking care of the operation site in Singapore here, producing solar panels for the world. Yeah, I think what Ben says is quite true. I think the journey to Industrial 4.0 can be quite scary for us at first as manufacturers. I still remember vividly that in around 2017 or 2018, where everyone is trying to get on board for Industrial 4.0 solution, but basically there isn't an industry standard or protocol like you can just follow, right? So it was quite how about searching solutions on your own and reading up and scouting through what are the solutions available at that point of time. So what we did was we actually sat down internally with all the key stakeholders and understand ourselves where we are at that point of time and what we want to do for Industrial 4.0. And from then on, we set on with a blueprint and what we want to do for Industrial 4.0. And that's how we started from there. I guess that's a very important and major milestone where companies should be setting a blueprint for themselves, what they hope to achieve for Industrial 4.0 and then proceed from there. Of course, after proceeding with the blueprint, we start to form a task force and start sending people for training on data-related courses, data analytic courses, Python, and various other courses available in the market, and that's where we started from there. Yeah.
And to offer maybe a differing perspective, Graham, you've worked with, I'm sure, countless leading Industry 4.0 adopters over the past few years. Have you seen a shift in how they prioritize what value means to the organization?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ben. And I think, first of all, I'd say what you mentioned at the beginning and the difference between 2016 and today, that's consistent with what we've seen in the industry as well. And I think if you go back a few years, we saw lots and lots of organizations that were really testing the water, very, very small scale, lots of POCs, where people were really exploring, sometimes really not knowing what they were going to get or not even knowing what they were looking for. And if you come forward to today, over that 5-year period, we've seen lots of organisations that have learned from that, sometimes technology providers as the technologies move forward, but often real people with real jobs who are really trying to understand how they drive efficiencies and drive innovations in their processes. And I think what we're seeing more and more today is what was at one stage POCs and really kind of exciting explorations of digital transformation has come together and is now being looked at much, much more from a holistic perspective, maybe from an end-to-end process perspective, but also people really starting to look across the broader enterprise. So moving away from the kind of departmental exploration and really looking for how do we scale this, how do we deliver value across the complete business. And of course, it's not just the complete company, it's not just the manufacturing world, it's also becoming about suppliers, it's also becoming about customers, and how do you really bring them into this Industry 4.0 world as well.
Exactly. And Saj, I guess if we look at your role, it's developing a business strategy for the manufacturers in the Asia region. From what we've seen, pockets of Asia have been a little bit slower on the uptake with Industry 4.0. So there's been some fantastic success stories. There's also been a lot of manufacturers that are just really struggling to work out how do we get this on our business agenda. And it's often due to the higher variability in needs. What would you say to these manufacturing organizations that have struggled to justify adopting Industry 4.0?
So we see this journey in 3 phases. Phase 1 is what we call the connected phase. Phase 2 is the predictive phase, and phase 3 is what we call a prescriptive phase. Many of our customers across Asia are in varying stages of the journey between phase 1 and phase 2. So a lot of companies in Asia are still in phase 1, being connected to the machines, connected to the plants, connecting all the equipments, because it's not as trivial as it sounds, even though the plants and equipments, even the brownfield sites, have been around for many, many decades. So some of these plants are quite old, so it's not easy to connect to all the machines. They don't have the same protocol. The hardware interfaces are very different, very unique. Vendors are maybe not in existence anymore. So that is the number one challenge we see many of our customers trying to get to in terms of getting those machines connected. But then there are some pockets of customers who have gone beyond that to the predictive phase, where they're actually using advanced analytics, using machine learning to come up with outcomes. So I would suggest that an outcome-driven approach is what we need to look at, as opposed to trying to connect everything and anything in the plant.
Agreed. And I guess this approach that you describe here, this can be applied to a wide variety of business improvement levers. So transparency and predictive-based technologies can correct and improve multiple parts of the business. What sort of themes are you seeing people apply these technologies for?
So before the pandemic, it was different. In the pandemic, of course, the focus has changed. So a lot of the focus in the pandemic was around cost reduction, productivity. So things of looking at quality improvement, for instance. So trying to drive quality metrics through maybe automated visual inspections of having more workers in the line, try to use cameras to look at the images and try to process them through machine learning techniques to get much higher level of reliability in terms of visual inspection. So this is one example how you would apply machine learning on an assembly line and get much better quality predictions as opposed to false positives you might get otherwise. So that's one example. I think cost reduction was the primary motivator, but we're now seeing other motivators in terms of revenue increase by trying to come up with new product innovation, trying to launch products faster, getting products to market faster. I think that's one area. And the next one is also trying to connect to products which are physically out there. So trying to launch and deliver new services, new business models that could drive new lines of revenue for our customers.
And I guess, Kei Hua, is this resonating with you? Are you kind of looking at these different value levers for your Industry 4.0 approach? Like, Have you evolved beyond cost reduction?
Yeah, I think definitely the business-wise, it's getting more and more compelling for us to embark more on all these Industrial 4.0 solutions. So I do see, other than business improvement, be it in terms of the product line stability or a low variation in the line, I do see huge behavioral change as well in the organization, right? Engineers and managers used to be very fearful of, what Industrial 4.0 is about. Now they greatly embrace Industrial 4.0 solutions. They are getting more enthusiastic, and the appetite for introducing greater depth of analytical approach in the production line itself is getting higher, right? For example, when we started, we used to focus very much on just diagnostic and fault detection model. And slowly we went on to predictive models. And like what Saj had said just now, right now we're going to the stage of machine learning, and right up to the models of unsupervised machine learning, whereby we are trying to detect anomalies, that there isn't a reference point for the models. There's no good or bad training data. So we are even embarking on this type of unsupervised machine learning. And the team do see a lot of benefits coming out. They used to spend about 70% of the time trying to find the root of the problem. But right now, they only spend 30% of the time getting to the root of the problem. And they have 70% of the time to embark on opportunities for improvement, be it in the process or in the equipment, right? And we used to spend a lot of time looking at control limits, but right now we look at anomaly detection, right? The process is not even our control. We try to address any drifts. We used to look at lagging indicators, but now most of our indicators are all leading. So all this encompasses the benefits that I see in the production floor when all these solutions are being implemented.
So it seems that the benefits within four walls are quite clear. Graham, I guess being in charge of digital supply chain, there's a whole new can of worms in terms of value that Industry 4.0 can deliver. And if I think about client conversations I've had in the past 12, 18 months, they always include resilience, sustainability. How have you seen this evolve in terms of businesses quantifying this as an improvement lever and prioritizing?
Yeah, and again, a good question. And I totally support the idea that organizations have become more and more mature with how they've started to connect and how they've started to use predictive technologies and how they're really driving improvements. And we've seen that. I think the one thing that is quite different and has been a slight shift in recent times is that who that is visible to. Because I think if we go back a little while, it was, if we were driving efficiencies, it was visible to the plant manager. If we were driving innovation, it was all within the walls. Whereas now what we're starting to see, because of some of the massive disruptions in recent times to businesses, we're starting to see the connection between Industry 4.0 technology and business strategy. We're starting to see disruptions that are bringing organizations, in some instances industries, in some instances almost countries, bringing them to a standstill. And therefore, I think this view now is not just within the walls of the factory. And I think in previous times, you would have said, how do we drive efficiencies? How do we drive cost out of this process? And in some companies, it would be, how do we drive innovation? How do we drive product quality, etc. Now it becomes much, much more about how do we ensure that our business can actually pivot in times of disruption? How do we build resilience and agility into the broader business process? And part of that in digitizing these end-to-end processes, and we call it digital supply chain, of which manufacturing is a central component. But part of that digitization of the process means that things like visibility, things like transparency of process really open up this whole topic of sustainability. So that through that digitized view of your end-to-end process, you can understand where inventory is, you can understand how you use spare parts, you can understand how you optimize logistics and transportation. So I think the picture becomes much more bigger, and it does become one of really a resilient business And for me, the most important thing is how do we use these technologies so that a business is agile, constantly being able to pivot as we see these disruptions impacting the business environment.
And I guess as these needs grow and you start to develop a more end-to-end overarching business need, the solution capabilities also have to advance, because as you mentioned before, historically we went from kind of developing these silo proof of concepts to now needing this whole ecosystem that connects. And I think if we look maybe 5 years ago, the technology was there if you tried really hard. Whereas I think now it's a little bit more accessible for many manufacturers. So Saj, how would you describe maybe the evolution in technology capabilities and how people are thinking about deploying systems to tackle these business problems?
Yeah, so you can look at this from traditionally it was largely focused on IoT. So everybody used to kind of equate IoT as Industry 4.0. But we've gone beyond that. I think IoT is just one component. It's more than that. It's the data, it's the platform, it's machine learning, it's the applications, and also connecting to enterprise systems, supply chain systems, and going beyond that to the end customer. So trying to find out how the devices are performing in the real world. So if you take Tetra Pak as an example, Tetra Pak wants to find out how their packaging machines are performing in a beverage manufacturer, maybe in Thailand, right? So that's where you would like to get to connect everything together in terms of how that equipment is performing, and tie that not just from a service perspective, but also go back to R&D to ensure that whatever you're designing in terms of your next release or next revision is incorporating feedback from the customer through sensors and technology. So I think it's evolved beyond just manufacturing, which was the initial focus of Industry 4.0, to cover the entire value chain and then drive the overall end-to-end process from design all the way to delivery. That's where we see this evolving.
And is this similar for you, Graham? Has your offering an ecosystem become almost this end-to-end thing that is designed to transform overall business operations rather than kind of these isolated applications?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this holistic view of Industry 4.0, which steps outside the walls of the factory, is fairly consistent, and I think it throws up a number of questions. So from a technology point of view, many organisations that are looking at this holistic process need to start thinking about how do we actually have a platform that can support a full enterprise as opposed to a POC or a point solution that might deliver some isolated value. So I think on the one side, we see people starting to look at technology and platforms that can support the enterprise. And that's really about bringing together all these different types of data and all these different types of analytic capabilities to support a full business. I think the other side of it that's kind of interesting is almost away from the technology, but is technology enabled? And that's how do you bring the players, how do you bring the different people that are part of the process together? So this becomes this kind of collaboration and having a consistent data picture so that you can collaborate on one version of the truth. I think recently we did some work and we were looking at vaccine distribution, which is relatively topical. And I think when we started to look at that, think of all the different players, because what we found was that actually you've got people that manufacture vaccines. You've got people that are in government organisations who have to make decisions about how they will be distributed. You've got then people that actually need to administer, and you've got people that are trying to take feedback at the point of delivery so you can understand who's being vaccinated. So there's all these different challenges that we saw in this one example. And what became really clear was that you needed a technology platform that could support all these different players with their different data requirements, but also you needed a collaborative environment that really allows them to share information and to really close some of the loops that are in the process. So I think for me, that's what we're seeing, big shift in terms of not just a platform for data, but also a collaborative environment that allows people to really utilize the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as this kind of ecosystem evolves, almost the business decisions can become a little bit more complex, whether you kind of have departmental solutions, an organization-wide solution, whether it's a standalone system, a partnership type system. Kei-Hua, how do you, as an end user, how do you navigate this landscape, and what are sort of some of the features that you might look for when you're deploying a solution?
I mean, it sounds interesting what Graham and Sash is talking about in the whole ecosystem. I think end-to-end ecosystem or platform is definitely very beneficial for us manufacturers, because there's simply only a limitation on what we can do, right? If that could be what we are doing are mostly horizontal integration. We have not taken very much approach into the Industrial 4.0 for the logistics segment of our business, the supply chain of our business, the facility, or even the human resource portion of the enterprise of our business. So if we could have that all on one platform or in an ecosystem, that would definitely benefit us, because there's a limit on how much we can churn out in terms of solution. I'm sure that can be left to the expert. And especially for us, where we export most of our businesses, the supply chain and all this, with the post-pandemic crunch, that becomes very critical for us delivering our goods to our customer on time. So I guess with that, our expansion plan going to global multiple sites as well, this type of solutions will definitely help us quite a bit. And with the numerous toolkit that I see on all these platforms, and with easier maintenance, I'm sure manufacturers like RAC will definitely benefit greatly in this full end-to-end solutions that we're talking about.
And I guess, Saj, the unique position of maybe Microsoft is that you're a little bit on the, well, you are a technology provider, but you also are linked with manufacturing capabilities. Do you kind of use this dual perspective to forge the development of your technologies and needs?
Absolutely. I think many people don't realize the volume and scale at which we ship and make and ship devices. About more than 200 million devices globally, 42,000 SKUs of products we ship. So we realized this, and last year we launched what is called an open manufacturing platform, along with BMW, ZF, AB InBev, and Bosch. And now it's been pushed to the Linux Foundation, and it's being run as an open manufacturing platform with over 50 different companies. So talking of ecosystems, so we have practitioners, we have system integrators, we have software companies who are all coming together, because manufacturing is a very complex world, and there are so many different protocols, so many proprietary systems. How do we get all this together? So OMP is actually working towards facilitating that through 4 different work streams. And I think that's one way we are actually contributing, both as a manufacturer and also as a service provider. And of course, there are many other companies in OMP as well who are joining this.
Exactly. And I guess collaborations are the future, and I think it's a very strong trend that we're seeing amongst technology providers, manufacturers, and even governments are starting to set up a lot of initiatives where they're starting to connect all these different players. Graham, how are SAP looking at like this partnership ecosystem beyond other vendors? Are you collaborating and working closely with the manufacturers to kind of develop the next generation solution?
Absolutely. So at SAP, we talk about our business network, and this is network technology that can really support all different parts of the business process. So with that, we work with organizations that are SAP customers, and we work with organizations that are suppliers to SAP customers. And in many cases, they're actually both, which is a great thing. So we do that. And I think one of the things that I just stress on the whole topic around collaboration and networking, because it became so apparent in recent times that we're talking about Industry 4 technology, Industry 4.0 technology. We're talking about manufacturing centric on this particular discussion. But what became so apparent during the disruptions caused by COVID was the kind of old adage, which is you're only as strong as your weakest link. And I think this has been one of the real drivers. So we saw organisations whose demand plummeted as a result, like in the automotive sector when COVID hit. And we saw organisations like HP, for example, whose demand, because everybody was working from home, shot up. So we saw all of these fluctuations. And what was really interesting was the impact that it had. For some organisations, demand went down and their weakest link was identified. For others like HP, their demand shot up and their real constraint became how do they store and move the goods. The logistics became the challenge. So I think what we're looking at in this whole concept of business networks is to ensure that we're providing that platform so you've got all the key players able to communicate. And again, I think by bringing suppliers, by bringing consumers, by bringing everybody into that world, it really helps be clear about where the weakest link is, and it helps organisations make adjustments. Now, that could be switching out manufacturing facilities, it could be moving suppliers, but it's all part of this holistic view. And right at the centre of it is a digital picture of your manufacturing process. It's like Industry 4.0 core concept that started many years ago. So it's really enabling the whole process.
Exactly. And I think it sounds like the technology has really evolved to a point where it's ready for manufacturers to adopt and really create huge value almost today. Definitely today. I guess the next challenge then is implementation. So I think the handover of that solution to make sure that it's really leveraged correctly and is delivering the intended value. Kehua, during your implementation kind of journey, what are some best practices that you would recommend to some of the people on this listening into this panel to ensure that they really are getting maximum value from their solutions?
Yeah, I think based on our experience throughout this journey, we really shouldn't set a so-called end point to it. To me, it's a journey. It's going to be a lifelong journey, way beyond what we can imagine. Of course, what is important, I would say, is really getting the internal stakeholders together and to do a buy-off on what the company hopes to achieve. I think that's really very important. And from then on, we can really get organized. And the second thing that I would share that I would think is very, very relevant would be about getting our people developed and trained in the areas that we want, in terms of Industrial 4.0, be it in terms of some data science, be it in terms of analytics, or be it in terms of programming. So we do form a special unit to basically send them for the relevant training to get them to be able to do their tasks and increase their competency. I think that's very important. And ultimately, when solutions are being implemented into the production or into the product line, and that's where you start to see the momentum moving and it starts to snowball, and you can effectively see that the line personnel are getting more and more confident with all the data analytics approach and with all the solutions that is there. And basically you can see them actively using it. And that's where you know that the adoption is really there and the path is in the right direction. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned training being really at the core of your success. And I think a lot of the technology providers have understood that almost it is somewhat an opportunity or a responsibility to help the manufacturers upskill on those solutions and really fully leverage them properly. And I think as a result, we've seen a shift where technology providers have gone from purely developing a solution to starting to focus a little bit more on services as well, through whether it's implementation support or after-sales services to whether it's application engineering or whatever it might be. And whether this is done internally or through strategic partnerships, it's definitely increasing. Graham, what are SAP doing to kind of guide manufacturers along the journey so that they can really make the most of SAP's solutions?
So, I mean, the word journey has been used a couple of times, and we would see this just like any other transformation. And we often use the expression digital transformation almost interchangeably with Industry 4.0 transformation. So I think, when we look at this, we have methodologies, we have a very significant ecosystem of partners, and we also have an in-house consulting capability as well. And I think we treat this like any other transformation. So we would look to build a roadmap. We would look for organisations to establish where the pains are today and establish where their priorities are today. And we would also really look to establish the stepping stones on this journey, because I think one of the things that's really important is that you need to be able to demonstrate some value quickly. You need to be able to demonstrate some quick wins. And that's the easiest way to drive adoption, if you've got something to hold up that is real and people can say, we couldn't do that before this program and we can now. So I think we've got various implementation methodologies that SAP's fairly well known for. But I think for me, treat it like a transformation, understand the pain and the priorities of the business, and then really look for some quick win stepping stones. But don't lose sight of that vision. And the vision needs to be, a roadmap which may be 3, it may be 5 years. And you really need to be making decisions on day one which support that 5-year vision. Because, like I said, this has gone away from being something that happens in a factory. This is a business strategy. This is a business transformation. And therefore, the timeline needs to reflect that.
Is this a similar approach for you, Saj?
Yeah, we use what is called like a 3-horizon framework, which is Horizon 1 is short-term, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. And we've been practicing this for a while. I think what is important to note is that when we work on manufacturing projects, it's very important not to do a POC, but make it what we call a minimum viable prototype, or an MVP, which means that if you are successful, that can be scaled and not just discarded as a POC, but something that you can take and start realizing value fairly quickly. So MVPs are where we're heading. And of course, Microsoft has a huge ecosystem of partners. We work with both software vendors as well as implementers. And that's been the nature of a business ever since inception. So that's how we work in an ecosystem to deliver value to our customers.
If we think about, I guess, where we're at today, just conscious we're approaching the end of our time limit. So maybe just kind of finish with one last type of question. Where are we headed tomorrow? How are we going to continue to drive value within manufacturing industries? And what's the solution of tomorrow? Maybe back to you, Graham.
Yeah, I think the solution of tomorrow is an evolution of the solution of today, if I'm really honest. And I think what we will see is how we use this technology, how we use this digital view, digital twin, digital representation of your business, and how we use that to deliver more and more value. And I think the key areas that we see on the agenda time and time again, consistent with being a business discussion rather than a technology one, is really about how do we use this technology to drive sustainable practices within the manufacturing sector, and increasingly, how do we use it to drive ethical practices as well? And I think both of those areas can really benefit from the sort of transparency and flexibility that Industry 4.0 digital transformation can deliver.
And Kei Hua, what's next for you guys? Where's RAC going with their journey?
Yeah, I think the journey will continue in terms of getting vertical integration. I guess we've done quite a lot on the shop floor. We are now embarking on the next phase, going into our global logistics segment, connecting to the supply chain, so both incoming and outbound. So we are engaging, of course, solution providers as well as some in-house help. So that is definitely the next leg of a journey that we are embarking on at this moment.
Fantastic. And Saj, what's next for Microsoft?
For us, it's two parts. One is the creation of more standard industry data models from all the data that's coming in from the plants, because it doesn't exist today. I think that's something that we are working on. Number two is data scientists are in short supply. What can we do to create more autonomous machine learning, autonomous AI? I think Ewa talked about unsupervised learning, but if you go towards deep reinforcement learning, there are really limited supply of data scientists. So what we want to do is help our customers build autonomous machine learning models using kind of a low-code approach, so that everybody, including a subject matter expert, whether it's a machinist or an operator, can start using machine learning without having to hire data scientists. I think that's what is the future, where you can actually see true value coming out of the data.
Fantastic. Well, that's our time for today. So thank you everyone for the great discussion, and thank you to everyone who joined and watched us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.